Hey guys,
Hello.
what's happening? How you guys doing?
Good. Happy it's Friday. How are you?
Good. Feeling good. Hey Calvin,
What's going on?
congrats on the role.
Thanks. It's gonna be quite a crazy journey, and I'm sure Belal can talk a little bit about joining an early stage company too.
Yeah, and everything's like remote, obviously, so it's got to be even harder, right?
Yeah, onboarding is gonna be really interesting and quite the learning curve. I mean, plenty of other people are doing it successfully, so fingers crossed that I can do it successfully as well.
Love it. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be good. How is the leadership and everyone there? Oh, look, Bilal's in here. Let's see.
The leadership is really great. I mean, the fact that I was able to, speak with them in extensive periods of time. That's one of the things that stood out to me is I was able to hop on a call and talk to the CEO for over 3 hours. Prior to accepting the role, the fact that he was willing to spend that much time with me shows that they really are a caring group and really want to help and are willing
Love
to
it.
answer questions that some people are not willing to be transparent about
Yeah.
certain things.
That's good. Nice. Love it. Looks like Bilal is jumping in.
Hey, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, man. How are you? Good to see you,
how you
man.
guys doing? Happy Friday, everyone.
Hey, happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Hi.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks for jumping in. We're really excited to have you here. So I'll kind of dive right in. I'm Hytham. As you guys know, I'm the executive producer at I'dhire.me. We have spent the last couple of months getting to know each of you guys and the rest of our community and really helping you stand out in your job search and get you connected with companies that are hiring in our network. As you guys know, we do these sessions where we bring in really great sales and marketing leaders like Belal, and we kind of dive into each of your unique situations. Normally, we really focus on like best practices that work in sales and marketing and how you can apply those to the job search. Belal is full of knowledge about multiple different things that work in sales and marketing. One of the things that really stood out to me, which is unique, is that over the past few weeks, Belal has been talking a lot about mental health in sales, and a lot of the same principles similarly apply to searching for a job. And obviously, there's been ups, there's been downs. You've all kind of experienced things differently. So would love to just, not necessarily get too personal, but just open up a bit about things that have been going well, things that have been not going so well, and ways that we might be able to help other people. So Belal, I'll let you kind of like take the lead. We try to give each person a little bit of one-on-one attention. Everyone here has like a different background. Like, Lucy was doing partnerships at ClassPass. She's also looking for a role right now. Calvin, you might know, was looking for an AE role. He actually got hired this week and started. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Darren's a good friend of mine. He actually is starting something new right now where he helps individuals who are caring for loved ones with a mental illness. So he has a lot of insights as well. And Patrice is located down south, but looking for a remote role in marketing, and also has some unique insights to share as well. So Belal, I'll kind of let you set the stage and maybe just give us one or two things that you're passionate about, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. It's an honor to meet all of you. I personally, it's like I'm looking for a job every year. It's insane. I've been a part of 7 startups in 10 years. So I change jobs quite a bit. Definitely been labeled the classic job hopper. I shamelessly keep on my profile the 3 stints that I did that were less than a year, which I have to explain to every single recruiter every single time, which is really annoying. But it is what it is. It's, I think for every startup that I've been a part of, there's probably like 100 plus that I applied for that I didn't get, right? At least. And I got a section on my G drive that's just resumes dating back 10 years, because I'm like writing one like every year. So I totally get what it's like. It sucks. And then these recruiters are so rude, aren't they? Huh? There's some of these ones that like give you a not interested when you come in for like a face-to-face interview, and you're like, you got to do better than that. I mean, or no response at all. Yeah, it's a pretty shitty game. So yeah, I mean, however I can help, I feel the pain, man. Looking for jobs is, God, it's grueling.
So Lucy, you are probably the most recent, I guess, out of everyone here at least. When you were laid off, I know you were mentioning it to us, it kind of like hit you out of nowhere, and you were feeling a little alone and just like, what am I going to do? And I know you've done a lot over the last week already, but why don't you take us through that, and like, what are some of the things that you face, and what are the things that you're still facing?
Well, I think comparing and contrasting, obviously this is a different situation, being that it's also a global pandemic. One thing that I've learned just within the past, 3 weeks of my job searching then versus my job searching now is I feel like then I did more of this just like mass apply, and not really researching and just kind of being like, well, that seems like good enough. And I think I'm having to, if I ever find myself kind of going down this rabbit hole of maybe mass applying, to just take a step back and be like, okay, do I really, if this, comes through as a interview opportunity, like, do I really want to waste like this, recruiter or talent, person's time? So just taking a deep breath and really like looking at Glassdoor, looking at Crunchbase, and now, GT.com, and seeing like, is this something that, would even be a good fit just based off research alone? So just trying to like keep calm, I guess, and, be persistent, but not, burn myself out to the point where I'm missing, red flags for me personally in my job search.
Yeah, it's tough too, because it's so easy to do that mass applying. I've done it multiple times. These jobs are really unfair oftentimes, because I don't know, it might be slightly different in marketing. I wouldn't imagine it's too much different, but very much in sales. They'll post a job, but they already know who they're going to hire for it. It's an internal. They're just doing it because they have to follow the rules. So they do it. I've been brought in multiple times where I went through the whole damn show, and they're like, yeah, we promoted so-and-so internally. And I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, check box on, the requirement to hire that role. And then I was just the collateral damage that got 3 weeks of their life wasted.
Yeah. I was talking to my roommate, and she was saying one thing that she's noticed. She was laid off as well, and she's in fashion and retail. So I feel like her industry is definitely kind of at a standstill. Is a lot of these companies are just taking job applications and just hoarding mass job applications, but not acting on them. And so that's something else that's in the back of my mind, being like, okay, I'm working my butt off on this cover letter and all this, and who knows, just probably going in this, pile that may never even be looked at, just to have, all these resumes on file for if and when they can hire again.
Yeah. I'll say this, Lucy, and maybe it's controversial to like give as advice, but I'm going to do it anyways. I feel the cover letter is a complete waste of time. I hated writing them as a candidate. I certainly never read them when I was hiring as a VP, because I'm like, who the hell's got the time? It's enough to get through the stack of resumes, let alone the cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
With like how prevalent video tech is now. I mean, you've got like Hippo video, you've got Drift video, you've got Wistia has a free one called Soapbox. And there's like Vidyard. There's like a million of these video tools now. That are really Loom, right? And their Chrome extension. There's so many of them. I just make like a short video and try to introduce myself and just try to humanize myself. And then there's this other like catch-22 of like, if I find the perfect company, but they're not hiring for my role, do I bother to try to pursue them? Because those are oftentimes better than the ones that maybe have jobs listed. But like we said, sometimes those jobs aren't, they're already marked for someone else, especially usually the higher level jobs. Like entry level, sure. If you're like trying to be an SDR or like your first marketing role, yeah, maybe those roles are just evergreen and they truly are hiring for them. But people don't hire strangers to be their like VP of marketing or like director of demand gen. They hire people they know for like senior roles. So there's that catch-22 of like, do I try to apply for a senior role that's listed online, knowing that they probably don't weigh strangers as equally as they will referrals and people they know internally? Or do I go after a company that I really love, that I know is awesome, that doesn't have the role that I want, and see if I can make them give me a role if I reach out to the right people in there, which is really time consuming. And you can't do both. Like, there's not enough time in the day to do both. So I feel you on that, but I think both could potentially work depending on where you're at in your job search and your timeline and your financial circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't you think one of the really tough things right now, though, is, I think in like normal circumstances that back channeling route, that's always the way. Like, okay, I really want to work for this company, but if they don't have any roles they're hiring for right now, don't you think that there's a really good chance that they're just on a hiring freeze overall because of like COVID, and that they're not willing to spend money?
Yeah, there's a really good chance of that. But like, let's say you get a bad job but they are hiring, and then you end up in like 6 months ready to leave, and then you're back at it again. There's
true.
no right answer. Like, right. Like, that's the easiest answer is there's no right answer. Unfortunately, that doesn't help anybody get a job or pay their checks. So it's like, it's not your fault, but it is your problem kind of a scenario, which are the worst ones to be in. Like, this pandemic isn't anyone's fault, but it's your problem now. Like, it's your problem now, right? Lucy, like, yeah, you have to deal with it. I have to go find a job in a pandemic, which sucks. I would wager that let's say you found a company, like you said, Calvin, like, we find a company, it's awesome. It's really good. They're not hiring. They're totally freeze. But you are able to back channel and get in because you do a really good job. You send video, you find out who the hiring manager is, you find the email of the recruiter, and you email them directly an introduction, and they take a time to speak with you. Is there a scenario where maybe you could negotiate something where you're like, could we do maybe something temp to hire? Maybe over the next 90 days, you might not be hiring. But if you see a fit with me culturally, and I see a fit with what you guys do as a company and culture wise, can we do something like that? I think if you find the right company, they would. I would, as a sales leader, as a former sales leader, if the right candidate reached out to me and I was like, I don't have something for you now, but people like you don't come along every day, I want to try to find a way to make it work. I would try that at least, but is it going to work every time? No. And I think if you put too much into that one channel, you would waste time for sure. And that's the closest thing to like marketing and sales we can bring it back to. It's like, it's a channeled approach, right? If I spend 20% of my time doing this, 15% over here, 30% over there, I'll be better off than if I just do, 70% of my time doing the easy applications on LinkedIn, right? Which are fun and they're quick and they feel good and they give you a little dopamine rush because you're like, oh, I just easy applied and I got the congratulations, you've been submitted for the role. But that's not how you get cool jobs. Like, nobody's got a cool job from the easy apply on LinkedIn. It doesn't happen that way.
Another thing that was suggested is also looking for contracted work. I had a friend that did that, and she landed a role before this by being contracted and brought on full term. And she said, I had never done that before, and it really opened up a lot of doors for me. So I think that's another route that I've also been, looking into as well, is also just like contract work. And even if it is just 6 months, can also give you, more experience, maybe try something new, and, open some doors. So just trying to be a little bit more creative and not just dismissing any type of opportunity because you never know what it could lead to.
True. Yeah. And marketing is more prone to freelancing and contracting anyways than most departments are. So there's probably more progressive companies that would do that. Again, if you're talking to the right person that would have the budget to do that. So yeah, that might be an interesting route. Yeah.
I'm curious, like how hard can it get? For example, like, Lucy, I know Calvin, when you were doing it, Patrice, I know Darren, you're doing your own prospecting. Like, if you're spending a lot of time on 80% of your leads, and you're not getting answers, or you're just getting no, thank you, not interested after a while, I'm sure it starts to take a toll. Like, are there ways, Belal, that you have dealt with like being motivated in that type of a scenario where it's like 1 week, nobody was answering? Like, how do you power through that?
Oh, I hated that shit. I mean, I try to get into Envision. You guys are familiar with Envision? They do. Oh yeah. So I tried to get into them way early on when they were like not cool yet, because I knew they were going to be cool. I could tell their tech was like legendary. I forget who their VP of sale was, but I did insane amount of research on this guy. I found out he was part of a book club. I found out what book they were reading. I found out he was a huge Boston College War Eagles fan. I like checked their schedule and see who they were going to play and all this shit. And I just wrote him the craziest set of emails that you just like no human rights to another human being. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
amazing stuff. And I'm like, this guy's going to appreciate my game. He's going to see my research. He's going to understand that he has to hire me. And I called him and I left him voicemails and everything. And he never responded, let alone like said, not interested, just never opened up my emails multiple times. Never responded to a single one of them. I think by the end of it, I'd done like 16 touches on the guy. Never.
Did you call him out?
What did you think? What was your gut reaction?
I couldn't breathe, man. I was like so pissed off. I was so angry. You know when you get so angry that you're like your palms get sweaty?
Yeah.
When I saw my email open from him, I wanted to slam my computer shut.
You took it so personally.
Stop touching my email. Like I wish I could take it back. Like you didn't deserve all that research. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted to work at Envision like you wouldn't believe. And sure enough, they did blow up, right? They're huge now. And I probably would have been one of their first sellers if I had joined at that time. That came at a point where I was like 3 months away from not being able to cover rent. So I was like, well, I don't get this job. I don't know what kind of job I'm going to get. And then I applied randomly to some startup called Connectifier on AngelList. And like a month before I was going to run out of money for rent, they called me for an interview. And I didn't care less because I was like jaded and angry at that point. And I was like, I'm not going to get it anyways. And I ended up being one of the first sales hires at that company. And it was acquired by LinkedIn for $150 million. And I got a really decent payout from it. So not only did I make my salary and my earnings and everything, I look back at that and I say to myself, had I gotten the job at Envision, who knows what would have happened, but I would never have gotten Connectifier. That was what was written for me. My fate was Connectifier, and that launched my sales career too. Because I moved up in 1 year at that company in a way I couldn't at any other company. I look back at that, that's like 7 years ago now. And then I think about the modern day job search, and every time I've gone back to search, and I've had to look for a lot of jobs after that, right? That was startup number 3. So there's like 4 more startups after that. So like 400 plus other applications. But every time I sent the application, I was like, is this my Envision or is this my Connectifier? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But I know my Connectifier is out there waiting for me, and I know I'm going to have to go through a bunch of Envisions to get there. So that's the best advice I could give, is like, that's what happened to me. It sucks. There's not a good answer to that. It's really frustrating. But detach from the outcome, because you're better than whatever your job is. Most of us are.
I think you just also have to trust the process. I had a similar experience in DC. I was in between jobs and I was on a call, and I was living off U Street. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Washington, DC area, or just DC proper. And he was like, well, we're not hiring right now, but you know, if you want to come down and like meet or see the place, like, you know, we're always here. And so I got dressed and put on some makeup, and I walked down and knocked on the door, and I was like, hi, I'm Lucy. We just hopped off the phone together. And he was like, you actually came down here? And I ended up getting an interview, but they still weren't hiring. And I remember they're like, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. And I kept following up. And at that point I was so irritated, because I'm like, I just went door to door, and I met you, I shook your hand, I walked around the space, I introduced myself to other people. I was like, I'm showing you I'm like a salesperson. And so I remember I just kept calling, and finally I got a hold of the guy, and I was like, by the way, I just accepted another role. Thought I'd, let you know. You never got back to me, but I'm following up to let you know you can take my hat out of the ring if I guess you already did. But it's one of those things where I've learned from that experience, because I'm like, if I don't get closure, they're not meant to be. But I'm like, why can't you just have the common courtesy to say, no, we're not interested? And maybe even I saw a post on LinkedIn, like, tell me why you weren't interested, or why you didn't want to follow up, or give feedback as to, just to help. I think that's like one thing. It's almost, I guess, as you compare to dating, if you get ghosted, raise your hand if you've ever been ghosted. you know?
Of
Yeah,
course.
like you're like, what the hell? Like, why can't you just have a
Why was I the
conversation
only
and
one that
say,
raised my hand? What's up with that?
you know, like, have fun, but you know, it's not going anywhere. Like appreciation goes a long way, common courtesy.
Would you have felt better if he just responded with a no? Just literally no.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, I don't know. I was like the girl from The Exorcist. Like my head was spinning. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to get a response out of you.
Yeah.
Sorry if I scare anyone on like YouTube. They're probably like, Lucy Chambers.
No, everyone goes through it. I mean, it's like from the smallest things, you kind of like just imagine all the worst scenarios and you think that you're the center of their world and they're like going out of their way to like not answer you, and they're reading this thing and consciously going, fuck this person, I'm not going to answer this message. But a lot of times, like Belal said, it's not in your control, and there's a million things that could be happening and you have no idea what they're going through. And that's like the empathy that you have to realize, you know. A lot of times for me, like there's a few things that make me feel better. One, if someone is doing that, either they're just not very good at their job, which is possible, right? You know, a lot of like B2B like buyers, you know, it's part of their job to respond to sales messages, at least that look somewhat valid, because they do have an interest in making their processes better. And then if they're experiencing a pain, they should be answering those questions. But unfortunately, you know, we were on with Jake Dunlap yesterday, and or the day before, and you know, we kept pointing to the word just like general overall laziness. And now you add COVID into the picture, and you add the fact that everybody's home and there isn't as much accountability and that sort of thing. You know, like, is someone who, you know, doesn't necessarily have a quota over their head, like someone as a talent recruiter or even a hiring manager, going to go out of their way to like dive into the messages that you're sending them to figure out if you're the right fit? Or are they just going to go, oh, you're easy, okay, yeah, I know you, I've seen you before, or oh yeah, my boss recommended you, or sure, like this is going to make me look, you know, the least bad if something goes wrong, and they just kind of go for the easy way. So a lot of times it's like that more than like your message sucked, or you know, they just didn't like you, or whatever you might be thinking.
Well, oddly enough, 2 years after that happened, I ended up running into that person in New York City.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it all kind of like made sense. And I was, you know, thankful. I'm like, wow, there's a reason this didn't work out, you know, so sort of like, you know, trust the process. And I think if you just stay positive and persistent, if you get frustrated, walk away, I love fitness. So take a class, go on a walk, go on a bike ride, and then like come back to it. But like, I feel like as soon as you get frustrated or anxious, or that's when you get sloppy or you just get into a certain slump. So I just think if you need to take a step back from it for a little bit and maybe go call a friend or maybe do whatever you need to do. But that's just the biggest thing, I think, because is realizing that some of these things are just out of my control, and all I can do is just stay positive and, you know, put on some tunes and keep doing it.
So you're getting a lot of love on YouTube, Lucy. Lucy, we love you. Don't even know you, but you're spot on. So you're getting a lot of love here.
Oh, good.
We also have a question from Sales 911. It's Jen. As a job seeker, do you see culture fit as a red flag for a lack of diversity? So what are some of the red flags that you see as you're kind of going through this?
Well, since I've been at a few companies now, I think for me, a red flag is when they're like, we're a family. Because then anytime I've been in a company where we're like, we're family, it's almost been like very odd. Like, I do like a certain level of professionalism. I don't like it when people like try to pry too early on into just my personal life. I think that's just weird. And like, I'm here to do a job for you and to be a team player. I don't know why you need to know like my backstory, like family wise. I find that's what I've found when, you know, you go into that type of culture. And it's funny that was the question, because I was talking about it with my friend who we worked together at ClassPass, and now she's at Google. And, you know, when we were both job searching, we said anything that's like really hones in on culture is a little odd, because I feel like culture can maybe go into, and sorry if this is the wrong word, kind of like culty. And it's like, I loved my team at ClassPass, and they're some of my best friends today. But at the same time, you know, after work, we would kind of go on and do our own separate thing and live our own lives. And that was okay. Where at another company I was at, if I had to like, you know, go and run an errand and they're like, where are you going? Like, where are you going? And I'm like, I'm going to a doctor's appointment. Like, do I have to tell you like what doctor that is? Like, I'm sorry. So that to me can be a little bit of a red flag. So I think asking questions around like, why is culture so important and what does that mean to that company is something you could ask, you know, while you're in the interview and seeing if you like that answer.
Love it. I would love to see a graph that shows the relationship between companies that say that they're like a family and companies that laid people off in less than 30 days after COVID hit and they couldn't actually
That'd be crazy.
Or say that they're a family and say that you have job security and then let you off.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
It's like kicking your, you know, cousin or brother out after a month of them not paying rent or something and being like, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like lessons
But
learned.
it is
And
what it
I
is.
mean, I think always presume good intent. People have like, they're not out there to get you. But then just, you know, asking those questions like right out. Every time I go into a new job interview now, I have a new set of questions based off my past experience. And I think asking about culture, if that's something that's in the job description, is important. So like, how would anyone else ask about culture?
So Patrice, why don't we jump into your kind of situation a bit. So have you been experiencing similar things? Like how are things going for you? What's working, what's
Things
not?
are going, I suppose, okay at the moment. I'm sorry if my mic's a little bit crackly. I'm having some technical issues. But I suppose at the moment, what I'm trying to do is I left my job in February in Ireland and moved over to be with my fiance over here in the States. And I decided I was going to take the month of March off work because I was like, oh, you know, I worked for a while. Then COVID hit, so timing wasn't my strong point. So at the moment, I have a few freelance roles. And at the beginning, I just wanted something very permanent straight away, and I wanted to work remotely because we're not sure on our location for the next couple of months. And I suppose for myself, when I was looking for roles, you know, 5 to 6 hours a day and researching these roles, you know, doing different cover letters. The cover letters really irritated me. It just, you know, when you put so much effort into them, I wasn't hearing back. And then I decided I'd switch it up a little bit. So kind of restructuring my day completely, trying to get some training in, some LinkedIn training, even I think the Google Digital Garage training, just to kind of refreshers to keep myself occupied, and then taking smaller bits of consultancy work. I suppose for me, that really helped my whole, you know, mental health around it. Because I think when you're just not hearing back, and even at one point I was like, oh, is my email address broken? You know, you're kind of, the whole time it's really disheartening. So for me, it was just to take what I can, you know, focus on my consulting at the moment and then look for the larger role after. But actually what Lucy was saying about the whole family culture, you know, when you work at small offices, it's very, you know, you can get very honed on it straight away. But I think at the moment when I'm consulting and doing remote working, like, you know, they're completely against that nearly. It's kind of like you work by yourself and you just send in your work.
Got it. Belal, I'm curious, you know, because obviously you know a lot about sales and prospecting, right? And getting into a company. Are there ways that we can like weed out some of the not so good fits? You know, ways that you can kind of get behind the scenes without, and you might not even have access to talk to someone that actually works there.
Usually can. I mean, you'd be surprised
There you
how
go.
many entry-level employees will talk to you about what's going on at the company. That's always what been my technique at a lot of these startups, especially the really young ones. So like, you know, and I admire what you're doing, Patrice, finding some freelance work. It's not easy to do, and it's not very gratifying. I'm finding that out myself as an advisor. Some of these advisor gigs suck. They're way more, it's like the same damn problems with a third of the time and like a third of the price. I'm like, I don't know who's getting the deal here. It doesn't feel like me.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to your point, Lucy, about trying to find out the culture. Yeah, I thought about that a lot too. It's things around like how they celebrate wins, how they train, How much money do they give for employees to who actually uses the budget for like self-improvement and education and so on? Those are sort of questions that hone in to see if they really do have a culture that holds up to the test or not. But yeah, I mean, these entry level employees are my best friend because they'll tell you what's really going on at the company. They're pretty easy to get a hold of. And oftentimes, if you have a good conversation with them at the end of the call, I'd be like, listen, quite frankly, the purpose of my call was to see if it's a cool company to work for. As you know, most suck. This sounds like it is one of the good ones. I'm so happy that you found it. I'd love to get a piece of that too. Would it be like a lot of trouble if I asked you to be a reference for me? Because getting in through the front door can be tough sometimes. I've rarely had people say no to that. It's happened, but very infrequently. Most say yeah. Like, the fact that you picked up the phone and bothered to do this shows me that you'd be the type of person I want to work with. I'm like, great. So I think you can do that. And for sales, it's easy. I guess a little bit easier because there's always SDRs and entry-level AEs at every company. So you can always find at least a subset of people that you'd be willing to talk to you about their experience so far at the company. If not, then look for past employees too, which will oftentimes be very willing to tell you about what happened. So those are my best friend too. And that's a pretty easy search to do on LinkedIn when you just search instead of current company previous, right? And you can find all the people that just left there and why. And they oftentimes know people at the company. So if they left for good reasons, it wasn't like a bad reason, just got something better or something like that. They oftentimes know people there and then they'll refer you to them as well. So that's been the techniques that got me in early at some startups.
Would you agree that
it's all a learning process too. Like, I feel like sometimes you really never know until you kind of get there. I mean, that's one thing I've learned is just even as much as you can ask and, as hope is people will be as honest with you as, you would hope. It's like, you really never know. You're there.
Well, I mean, would you guys agree that culture is essentially everything in a way? Like, it doesn't matter if you guys match on paper. At the end of the day, culture will end up winning out, right?
Yeah, I think you can match on paper in a lot of places. And, even when you're looking at different job specs, you're like, okay, that sounds great for me. And then you do a little more research, you're like, oh, well, maybe not. I think it's really important to talk to past employees, and even any of the positions that I've entered or applied for, I've always tried to make a connection with someone, or try to know a friend who knows a friend, just to get a little bit of background, because it's so easy to put up a job spec and to apply, what it was before this pandemic, to get into places and get your interview, and initially you can be very hopeful, but after working there a couple of weeks, I think Belal said about job hopping. If it's not right for you, and you haven't done your, if you've done your research beforehand and it's still not right for you, at least you can mark it off and say you tried everything. But if you go in there a little bit blindsided, and the culture kind of surprises you in the way everything operates, and even the way they handle different things. I think training in particularly, you can go into some environments and they're very positive towards them. Some of them are like, oh, well, maybe next year we'll push it off, and you really learn a lot about an office culture from that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's crazy, like, since we're on the topic of culture, there's all these rankings like Glassdoor, Forbes, comparably best places to work and stuff. And I think that if you ask enough people at some of these best place to work companies, it's actually quite ironic, because you actually find out the culture is absolutely atrocious and the system is a little bit rigged in terms of that. I'm not saying that, there's definitely companies on those lists that have amazing culture, because you're not just picking companies out of a hat to get on that list. But there's definitely plenty on there that, they're just a bigger company. They have a good brand and they have done a good enough job self-promotion. And then a lot of these lists, there's some type of payment to even get onto these, like, oh, hey, you got ranked. We want to put you on this list. Hey, will you give us some money to be on this list? It's so funny.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
I just have a quick question for Belal. In the age of remote work, what does culture now mean, and what do you think that means moving forward? and what's the big difference from going into the office to many companies like Twitter saying you're never going to have to come into the office again. Quora just said it last night, they're getting rid of their office. What do you think that means?
Yeah, that's a good question, Darren. People got this myth around remote work that it's like super awesome, and it's not. I did it with Clearbit, and I can tell you right now, you can put yourself at a massive disadvantage if the company's not culturally set up to do remote work. And the key element to cultural success with remote work is meticulous documentation. I need to self-serve. I need to be able to answer my own questions that come up in the day. I don't need to ask somebody because I can't, because we're remote. And Slack and whatever tools the company uses, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack, whatever, is not enough to get a proper answer. And oftentimes it results in a 15 or 20-minute conversation of somebody else's day that they might not be able to give me. And if I don't get the answer I need, then I can't do what I need to do. And you look at companies like GitLab, right? They have their documentation online. It is insane. It is so thorough. And that's how they've been able to scale and grow to what they are today, because their documentation is meticulous. And I would warn anybody to take a remote job, because there's 3 flavors of remote. So there's everybody's remote, and they always have been. That's awesome. That means that they built it from day one and it was premeditated. It wasn't accidental. We've got a team that's remote. So like our engineering team is remote, the rest of our company isn't. Well, then if you're joining the engineering team, you'll have a fun time. If you're joining the other ones, get ready, because you're going to be experimented on. Yeah, they're not set up for that. And there's we want to try remote, which is usually a recipe for complete failure. That's the scenario I was at Clearbit. I was the first remote sales hire. 25 of my colleagues were in San Francisco. I was in Atlanta. 50% of the company's remote. So the company has a remote culture. The sales team does not. I found out that doesn't work. It was a really tough time. 6 months into the job, I was asking questions that somebody who got hired the same week I did was answering for me, because they were in the office and I wasn't. And I was like, how'd you know that? And he goes, well, so-and-so said it over lunch. And I'm like, well, I don't eat lunch with you guys, so how would I know that?
Yeah.
And if you didn't take the time to write it down, where am I going to read it? And I'm looking through old documentation and saying the wrong things to prospects because nobody updated it. And I don't even know that it needed updating, let alone that I was saying the wrong thing. This is not a good time. This is not a good time. So, remote success, I love to see how Twitter's going to pull it off. It's so hard to just to get all that tribal knowledge documented when you weren't doing it from day one to begin with. I just don't see how that's going to happen. They're going to experience it on a massive scale, the way I had to on a very small scale at Clearbit.
That's interesting. Might create some new jobs.
We were actually talking about
manager
that
of
the other
remote
day.
culture.
Yeah.
Head of remote. Love it. So let's switch gears just a little bit. So Darren, you have a really interesting project that you're working on, which isn't really focused on helping people that are having mental health issues. You're actually helping people that are caring for loved ones who have mental health issues. So that, I'm sure, happens to all of us, or many of us, either within our job search or while we're trying to build something new, or while we're trying to reach some goal. What has been your experience, and what have you heard from others when they're dealing with that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, my experience personally, I have a family member that is battling schizophrenia, and just going through that entire process could be a heavy burden. Searching for correct information, something that's right for one person is not always right for the other. And to kind of just bring it more up to speed, just recently with COVID, my girlfriend is a nurse, and you can just imagine the amount of anxiety once COVID hit that she was going through, and not being able to see her for a while and just trying to support her. It's better to have somebody to speak with and figure out how to support her. So whether that's just listening and not saying anything, changing the subject to something more peaceful. This is, trying to get her not to blame herself. This is totally out of her control. So it's been tough, but having a community like Mindset to be able to speak with other people who are going through the same thing is definitely able to alleviate some of that pressure.
Do you feel like any of the people that you're, working with, how are they dealing with it, especially as they're also living through this pandemic? They're also trying to work full time. Maybe they're fearing that they're going to be furloughed or laid off, but they still have to care for this family member. Like, how do they navigate that?
I think it's the thing is, we're all going through it at the same time, right? Nobody has the correct answer, but I think just being able to speak with one another and say, hey, this isn't working. I think that's always important, so somebody else doesn't make that same mistake of trying to help their wife, their daughter, their son. That helps to save a lot of time. And I think moving forward, I think as we come out of this pandemic, especially kind of bringing this back to the job search or whatever it may be, there's going to be a lot of people that get left behind and aren't rehired, or their job's never going to rehire. So I think moving forward, it's really important to kind of arm ourselves with that information, because I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think like Belal, for example, you talked a little bit a few weeks ago with mental health and sales, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be as specific as a loved one, dealing with a mental health challenge, or it could be just anything going on in your personal life, right? Kind of taking you away from the dream that you're trying to build towards. I'm sure you've had those types of moments throughout your career. How have those gone for you? What was the thing that kind of helped you bounce back, which is inherently flawed, as you mentioned as well, which I loved? How do you kind of approach it?
I mean, let's back up for a second. Mental health and health in general in the U.S. is atrocious. Our country and our culture as a country has a major issue with mental health, which is very strange for a progressive, liberal, first world country. We don't deal with health in general and mental health specifically very well in this country. My wife works at Grady Hospital, which is the largest public hospital in the country, one of the largest in the world, on the assertive community treatment team, the ACT team, that goes out and tries to help homeless and disenfranchised individuals that suffer from mental health not end up in the ER every other week. So I see firsthand through her work just how challenging it is, and the family members who have to try to care for those individuals with schizophrenia, who are manic bipolar, all these sort of issues. And taking even back to like in the professional world, I mean, I said it on the webinar and I'll say it again, you shouldn't tell people at your work that you suffer from mental health. You shouldn't. That's a fact. There's a very rare circumstances where you should. It's an HR issue. Don't tell your manager, and definitely don't tell your colleagues. It's taboo. You're going to be looked at differently. You're going to be treated differently, and they're going to be looking to get you out the door for somebody that doesn't have those issues, or seemingly doesn't have those issues. That's how it is. The rights of the employee and the employer in the country are not balanced or fair at all. We do things as employees that we would never do in any other social circumstance or contract. Every employee that gets hired in this country, no matter what job it is, signs an employee handbook on day one that waives fundamental basic rights that no American citizen would waive in any other circumstance. Things like you can't disparage your employer, but there's nothing in there that says your employer can't disparage you, right? Things like you're committing to protecting the rights and everything of your employer. Your employer doesn't have to uphold any of that against you, right? You see sellers get fired the day before their commission check's supposed to come out, and they have no repercussions because it's employment at will and their employer can, right? So we've got a lot of unhealthy things culturally in this country. This is one of them, one that's pretty prominent, because I don't think there's a single person in the US that isn't at least 3 degrees of separation away from somebody who suffers from mental health, depression, anxiety, whether it's, the lighter forms, lighter, but they're just as serious, or some of the more pronounced forms of mental health issues like schizophrenia and so on. So there's a major issue in this country. And I think that you got to keep that stuff close to your chest, because the employment, your workspace is not a safe space for that kind of stuff. And going back to the whole "we're a family" thing, that's where you'll see it.
It's really interesting.
Real quick. Yeah.
Talking about, we were talking about kind of how do you deal with rejection, and this is the software I'm selling into companies right now, and trying to explain to these CEOs that you have employees that suffer from a mental illness right now, or are caring for somebody, and you just don't know, right? So, I'm seeing them open this email 15, 20, 25 times, and they're not responding because I think they're confused. It's not until that they forward it to their HR people that, they then book a meeting, because I'm sure that they're more grounded on the situation. But that's definitely something I've had to deal with as well, as, just trying to sell this story or let them know what's really actually happening.
They probably don't want to hear it. It's probably easier just like not know about it. Ignorance is bliss, right? We follow a pattern as human beings of like mitigating harm to ourselves, and knowledge is harmful in some scenarios like this. Like, I don't want to know, right? I don't want to know. I'd rather just fire that person, not knowing that they were suffering from depression, because that makes me feel better and sleep better at night. But if you tell me they have depression, then I feel bad for firing them. I'm still gonna. But you know what I mean? Like that's the reality of some of those scenarios. It's very troubling. It's a very troubling trend. And it's a fundamental issue that goes beyond just the workplace as a societal issue. It's a societal issue.
Don't you think that in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of improvements though? And like, I would definitely have to say that there is still definitely a prominent issue, but I think it's becoming a lot more prominent, that a lot more people are openly talking about it and bringing it to the forefront, that it should be something discussed. Like, we need to realize that this is an issue and start working towards solving this.
So there's been a $1 billion campaign, billions over the past few years of erasing stigma. And this is, this could be time for another discussion, but there's a very big difference between mental illness and mental health. They're two totally separate things, right? Somebody breaks up with their girlfriend, the doctor's going to say you have depression and just give them depression medication, right? There's kind of a lot that should be done with that shouldn't be handed out so easily. But there's been a big campaign against reducing stigma, and you are starting to see people come out and talk more freely about their issues. So there definitely has been some improvement in that area, but structurally, we have a long, long way to go.
So, Belal, we have a couple of minutes left. I would love to hear, kind of not on a mental health related issue. I love kind of the conversation that we've had. I think it's really important. I think it's going to help a lot of people. I think it will help us all kind of have that empathy and, detach ourselves from the outcome and just understand that there's a lot of things that aren't in our control. And the more that we, focus on things like our work ethic, our moral fiber, things like that, the better off we'll be. Tactically, Belal, if you were, say, searching for a job right now, and obviously you have a very big network and you have a lot of this kind of built in, but let's say you were employed, for the last 10 years in the same company, and then all of a sudden you were just like upended and everything kind of changed. What would be like the 3 or 4 things you would do after the basics of like updating your LinkedIn and stuff like that? Like, how would you tackle that process?
Yeah, it's not easy. Like, if there was an easy answer, everybody would be getting jobs doing whatever that thing is. And the reality is it's one of those answers where it's like everything I could say just amounts to a fraction, and it all has to be added up and done to achieve the desired outcome. And I shared the story of like Envision and Connectifier, and like, that was a really do or die time. And it just happened that way after months and months of trying to find a job. And that's oftentimes how it goes. What I will say is this: just like people buy from people, people hire people they know. Like, it's a very, like, nepotism is a real thing, right? Like, the stats around employee referrals are real. you're not going to get your dream job by easy applying on LinkedIn, right? So I look at it like when I joined many of these startups as the first sales hire, the right answer is oftentimes one thing, the wrong answer is many. And it's easier sometimes to say, well, what will I not spend my time doing? What is a waste of time? And let me avoid those things that will get me closer to the right answer, because odds are I can't guess the right answer out the gate. So if we're looking from that perspective where there's more to do than time to do it and more questions than answers, the right way to do it is by saying to yourself, easy applying on LinkedIn. The fact that it's so easy for me means it's easy for every other candidate, which means I'm probably not going to get this job because that's way too much noise. Trying to cold apply on ZipRecruiter to 1,000 jobs at once because I click the check all and then send my resume is probably not going to give me a job, because everybody else that went on ZipRecruiter today did the same thing, right? I know that referrals are the preferred way that companies hire, and the stats are extremely obvious on that. So how do I become a referral? And then I need to reach out to my network first and foremost, because they should be able to refer me. And if they can't, then I need to create a reference for myself, which is like the task of reaching out to an entry-level employee or a former employee of a company that you care for and trying to create a reference from that individual. And that's probably your highest likelihood. It's time consuming. It will not work for a significant portion of the time, but if you do it for a long enough sustained effort, you will eventually get that, right? You will eventually land what you expect. And in the meantime, with Lucy thinking about freelance work and Patrice being able to do that now, I think we're living in an economy that's more prone to like the gig economy, of being able to do side hustles and finding little odd jobs to do here or there. That's becoming more and more prevalent. There's no reason why you can't, while also looking for a job, like get on Fiverr and try to build out a profile there and see if you can just get some work going on something that you feel you're an expert on. Because for everything you feel expertise on, there's 1,000 people out there that want to learn that thing and would rather just learn it from you than read the textbook or go through the years you took to master it.
Yeah, and then there's so many websites, not even just like Fiverr. I'd say there's at least like 15 probably websites you could sign up and do like contract work for.
Yeah, and I would say the opportunity is now, right? Like there's no better time. And something that we talked a lot about over the last few days is just focusing on that journey and not necessarily on the destination, right? And knowing that the fact that you are being challenged in this way is only going to make you better. You're going to start to figure out like, what are you really good at? What are you really bad at? You're going to start doubling down on your strengths, right? You're going to go through the process of connecting with people. You're going to do the outreach. You're going to think of what you're going to say going in. You're going to go in, you're going to have the conversation, read the room, follow up afterwards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to go through that entire process and you're going to do that over and over and over. And just imagine how much better of a person you're going to be after going through that process. So I would look at this as an opportunity to really like hone that, because you wouldn't have had this opportunity otherwise. And now is the time to do it. This is the time where you can really stand out by going that extra like 3 or 4 steps that a lot of people just won't do.
Yeah, going off of that, I would say like it's not necessarily for everybody, but I think putting yourself out there on LinkedIn and putting some posts out can be really beneficial. That's how I was able to land my job. I posted 2 back-to-back posts about being laid off, and had like over 20,000 people view it. And it was not something that happened overnight, but I had plenty of people that reached out. And then 2 is, somebody reached out to me, and I felt like, I had to give back to this kid because he put in so much time to reach out to me and was treating it like a sales process, continuously following up, multiple times. He like double messaged me before I replied. And now I'm reaching out to him to like double check, like, okay, how'd that interview go? Like, what else can I do for you? Because he's staying on top of it. I made a suggestion, boom, he changed that on his LinkedIn within hours. And I think whatever it is if you get in front of somebody at a company and they tell you to do something for like that, then they can help you out to get in as a referral. you know, some people won't do that. And that's like another thing that's key, is just like do whatever other people recommend and then ask them, okay, like what's next?
Absolutely. And we talked about this the other day too, Lucy, with when we did the session with Jake, and Jake kind of called you guys out a bit too. He said, you know, afterwards, when we go through and revamp your LinkedIn and change the about and the headline, et cetera, you kind of ping me right away. We went through it. We had a feedback session, and now the invite is open for you to reach out to Jake and say, hey, these are 3 people in your network that I want to connect with. So many people don't take people up on that. It's crazy. And like, I think a lot of it just is our own like negative self-talk, being like, they're not going to do it, or I'm bothering them, or, you know, for some reason you talk yourself out of it. But take people up. Like, people do want to help you.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I've like continuously struggled with is, you know, I put myself in good circles with certain people, but you know, okay, you get help with one certain thing, but it's sometimes it does feel like you're annoying them, or, you know, but you know, if you show that you really care and you really respect their opinion, a lot of people even, and somebody else said this, I think the other day I heard this, it was like Amy Volos or Scott Lee, some Thursday Night Sales said this, is just make it as easy as you can for that person to help you. If you say, I really care about this certain thing, you know, as simple as you can make it for them to say yes, no, do this certain thing, the more likely they are to help them. Because so many people are reaching out asking for time. Is if you're going to ask somebody for their time, don't just ask, hey, can I pick your brain? Go, this is like a podcast I heard you on, or this is a post I saw, you know, this is why I want to, you know, speak to you. And that's something I learned too, is like when other people reach out to me, I'm like, wow, that's how bad it looks when I used to do that too, is, you know, just because, especially too, is sometimes you did listen to a podcast, you just don't mention it, is like taking that little step where it's the relevancy where, oh, we met at this event, or I saw this podcast and this thing stuck out, not, hey, I heard you on a podcast, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. The easiest thing, the best deposit you can make is give someone a compliment about something they did. You know, no one's gonna be mad at you for that.
Yeah, I always tell everybody like the 2 biggest things, like especially because we're all in like sales and marketing, is, you know, a lot of other people in sales and marketing, because you have a similar title, are going to be willing to help. And then the second thing is everybody has an alumni network. You can literally just search everybody who went to your college that's an alumni in that title. Hey, as a fellow whatever school alumni and fellow salesperson or fellow marketer, I'd love to connect, and, you know, then something specific about their profile. Hey, I saw you worked up at J&J over the past 3 years, worked up from a SDR to a VP of sales in this segment. You know, I'd love to learn how you did that and how I can do that in my career as well. I'd say like 9 out of 10 times you're at least going to get accepted. And then, but that's the other thing too, is once you get accepted, is actually following up on that, because sometimes they're not going to reply too.
Yeah, I usually expect them not to.
Yeah, you nailed it, Calvin. Like, that's literally it. Especially if you talk about people's work experience. Yeah. If people want to be helpful, it's a psychology principle. So we actually psychologically want to be helpful. We're pre-wired to be that way. Some sort of social construct in our minds. So you should definitely work off that. And then consistency theory, when people say yes to something small, they're more likely to say yes to something big, and they're more likely to continue saying yes and not say no, because we want to appear to be consistent. We're actually hardwired again to resist being inconsistent or erratic in our behavior. So these are like you had Jake on the call, you've got me on a call now. If someone were to contact me and be very specific about what they wanted, so it's really easy for me to understand what they want, and they're not necessarily asking for my time, or if they are asking for my time, they're explaining why they want my time, instead of being like ominous and vague, like, hey, can I just talk to you? I'm like, no, I don't know who you are. Can you tell me why you want to talk to me before I just get on a call with you? But when people are very specific and they tell me why, and it's a very clear reason, I'm like, yeah, of course, certainly, yeah. And when people haven't asked for me, they're like, do you know someone at company X for position Y? That's what I'm looking for, and that's my background. Here's like 3 things about me that fit for that role. I'm like, well, that makes it really, really easy. Now I can just copy and paste the 3 things, see if I know anyone at that company, and then make the introduction with a paste of those 3 things. Be like, hey, so-and-so reached out to me. They said these 3 things I'd like to connect you to. That takes me like 3 seconds versus, hey, can you introduce me to someone in your network? I'm like, gracious, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. Doing? But think about how good that makes you look too. But like when you forward a message like that to someone, you're like, I'm bringing you someone who went above and beyond, who did make it easy for the person to make the intro too, you know?
Yeah, and then like once you've done that and you've introed a great person too, it's like, okay, now I know like Belal now is like an expert, and it's, oh, do you know any, then the people start reaching out to you like, oh, do you know anybody that, you know, would be a good fit for this role? And I just had that even happen to me recently. I was like, wow, that's great. But I think, yeah, that you nailed it too, Belal, is, you know, people want to feel like they're an expert. And then too, like once somebody also has already said yes to something, not even just the consistency, it's also, I'm not going to say yes to helping somebody out if I don't like them. So once I've already said yes to helping you with something, I already automatically, like in my mind, feel like, oh, I like this person. That's why I'm helping them. So then they're going to be more willing to just continuously do that as well. It's like the same, I forget what the psychological principle it is, but it's on the same exact thing you were touching on.
Liking theory.
There you go.
Love it. Well, we have the topic for our next conversation then. Love it. No, this is awesome. Thank you so much, Belal, for joining us. I know you're super busy. It's a tough time, and I really appreciate you jumping in, and everyone for participating very actively.
Yes.
Oh, it's my honor.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Well, look out for the highlights of the video. And yeah, this was super awesome. I'm very excited. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, everyone too. Happy Friday.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.